The Heaven Sword and Dragon Saber. Author, Jin Yong. Chapter 4. Part A. Filled with pain and frustration, with nowhere to vent, Zhang Wuji tossed and turned on the bed for over 2 hours. He then quietly got up, and decided to beat up Duda Jin to vent his frustration. Afraid that his big brother and fourth brother may stop him, Zhang Wuji stayed extra quiet as he walked through the hallway. As he entered the main hall, he saw a man with both hands behind his back, pacing back and forth continuously. In the darkness, his eyes gazed upon a tall shadow figure, making heavy footsteps, and realized that it is the master. He stopped immediately, knowing his master would detect any further movement. Should the master then ask him why he is up, Zhang Wuji would have to tell the truth. Only to see Zhang Sanfeng pace back and forth for a while, inspecting his surroundings, when suddenly he raised his right hand, and began to write characters in the air. Zhang Sanfeng is as much a scholar as he is a martial arts master, and his students often sees him reciting poems and writing characters. So it's not unusual for him to do such a thing. Zhang Wuji looked at the strokes he made in the air, realized the characters were grief disorder. After repeatedly writing those two characters a few times, he followed up with the characters D poison. Then it suddenly dawned up on him, master's writing out the characters in the grief disorder writing style. Zhang Wuji received the nickname of Silver Hook and Iron Brush, because he used a silver tiger hook with his left hand, and a judge's iron brush with his right. After getting this nickname, he realized that scholars might snicker at him being fake scholar, so he began to study literature just as hard as his kung fu. Zhang Sanfeng was indeed writing in grief disorder writing style created by Wang Ziji. By now his master's finger brush did not lower back down or retract, did not return nor repeat, following exactly the intentions of the grief disorder notice. Zhang Wuji had seen this style of writing 2 years ago. He remembered that its usage of the brush emphasized easy top to bottom strokes, words clear and strong but hard to pull up. Zhang Wuji always preferred Orchid Pavilion poem sequential writing style, 17 writing style and others that are more majestic and solemn in nature. At this moment, as he saw his master's finger writes in the mid-air, tired of obeisance, incredible grief and disorder, the ancestors' graves one again tormented, difficult to bring back. Each stroke filled with an air of gloom and grief. He saw just how Wang Ziji must have felt when he created this grief disorder writing style. Wang Ziji lived in the Eastern Jin period. He was born to a prosperous family, but was not of Han origin. His family went southward to escape the chaos. During this chaotic time, his ancestors' graves were robbed, which really saddened his heart, and quite evident in his misfortune disorder writing style. Being a carefree youngster, how could Zhang Wuji possibly understand the nature of this writing style? But his martial brother's terrible injury finally allowed him to comprehend the depth of misfortune disorder writing style. Eastern Jin is one of the countries that existed between the Three Kingdoms era and China's reunification under the Sui dynasty. Zhang Sanfeng repeated those words several times, sighed deeply, walked to the center of the room, paused for a moment, and then started to write again. This time, his strokes again looked different. Zhang Wuji followed Zhang Sanfeng's fingers, saw that the first character written was martial, the second one world. In succession, Zhang Sanfeng wrote out 24 characters total, exactly the phrase they discussed earlier, martial world's most venerable, prized saber dragon slaying, controlling all under heaven, none dares to not follow. Power of heaven not appear, who can possibly compete? Zhang Wuji thought his master wrote them to better comprehend the meanings behind these words, and deduce the cause of Yu Daiyan's injury. But how did this event have to do with the Dragon Saber and Heaven Sword, the two supreme mythical weapons? Only to see him write those words over and over, in many different ways, his strokes became longer and longer, his arm movements slower and slower, until they began to move with great ease, as if he were practicing martial arts. Zhang Wuji, fixated on his master's movements, was amazed and joyous. His master had combined the 24 characters into a single, powerful martial arts style. Each character contained multiple moves, with even more variations. The characters Dragon and Compete contained numerous strokes, while the words Saber and Under have only a few, but the longer characters were not written in a hurry, nor the shorter characters crudely, the contracted strokes were just as striking. like a cankerworm unyielding. The vertical strokes were just as dangerous, like a cunning rabbit escaping. The dots were written with ease, yet powerful and sturdy. The long slants seemed like the blowing wind, the dancing snow. The thick and heavy parts seemed like a tiger's squat, an elephant's footsteps, only to see some strokes floating in midair, like the dancing of the snow, while others heavy as tiger's roar, moving as an elephant. Zhang Quishan's eyes followed the movements thoroughly, and instinctively began to memorize them. These 24 characters contain two not into heaven. Yet each one is written in a unique manner. In the recent years, Zhang Sanfeng rarely taught Kung Fu anymore. Song Yuanchao and Yu Lianzhou taught his final two disciples, Muo Shenggu and Yun Liting. So despite being the fifth disciple, Zhang Quishan really is the last person Zhang Sanfeng had ever taught Kung Fu firsthand. Before, Zhang Quishan's knowledge was limited, and rarely grasped the deep concepts behind much of the martial arts skills Zhang Sanfeng demonstrated. But he had since come a long way with the experience of recent years, plus the fact that they share the same feelings tonight, two hearts as one, meeting misfortune and felt anguish, encountering torment and whisked it away. Under these extraordinary circumstances, Zhang Sanfeng changed these 24 characters into a type of martial arts. He obviously did not plan on it, just as it was pure coincidence that Zhang Quishan would see him as this moment. The two of them, one watched while one practiced, immersed themselves into these words, forgetting the outside world. Zhang Sanfeng repeatedly wrote those words for over 4 hours, until the moon had risen to the top of the sky. Swoosh, the right palm came straight down, just like the sparkle of a star or a sword, thus completing the final stroke of the last character compete. Zhang Sanfeng then looked up into the sky, and said, "Quishan, what do you think of my writing skills?" Zhang Quishan gasped in shock, as he did not expect his master to notice him without ever turning around. He promptly walked out of his hiding place, and said, "For your disciple to personally see master put on such an amazing display, words cannot even begin to describe my feelings. I'll go get the others so they can also learn it." Zhang Sanfeng shook his head, said, "I got caught up in the moment, which is why it looked so good. If you want me to repeat it again, I doubt I can write nearly as well. Besides, the other students don't know much about calligraphy. Even if they do see it, they would have a hard time comprehending." As he spoke, he walked out of the main hall. Zhang Quishan did not dare sleep, for fear of forgetting these intricate techniques, and immediately sat down in a meditating position. Each stroke, each drag, each move, each variation, silently recorded into his memory. Sometimes, he'd write out a few characters from the excitement. Even Zhang Quishan himself could not remember how long it took him, but he finally recorded those 24 characters, and 215 variations. There are 215 strokes within those 24 characters into his memory. He stood up, practiced once, and felt his body light and calm as the cloud, incredibly refreshed. When finished, he looked up, blinked a bit, only to see the sun high up in the western sky. Zhang Quishan gathered himself, not believing that it's past noon already, but finally realized that he had been practicing for more than half a day. Zhang Quishan wiped off the sweat on his face, and walked over to Yu Dayan's room, only to see Zhang Sanfeng healing Yu Dayan with his inner power. Upon asking, Zhang Quishan found out that Song Yuanchao, Zhang Songzai, and Yun Liting had left in the morning. None of them said goodbye, as they didn't want to interfere with his meditation. The Dragon Gate escort agency's people also left. Although Zhang Quishan's clothes were now soaked in sweat, Zhang Quishan was in too much of a hurry to change them. He quickly grabbed his weapons and his normal change of clothing, took out some travel money, and returned to Yu Dayan's room, said, "Master, your disciple will be leaving." Zhang Sanfeng nodded, smiled slightly. Zhang Quishan walked to the bedside, only to see Yu Dayan's face gray-black, his whole body almost like a dead person. With pain in Zhang Quishan's heart, he said, "Third brother, even if it costs me my life, I shall give you your revenge." He then kowtowed to his master 3 times, and left. He rode his long-legged spotted horse down the Wudang mountain. By the time he left Wudang, it was already pretty late in the afternoon. Night came after riding south for only about 20 miles. Just as he entered the roadside inn, dark clouds gathered in the sky, followed by pouring rain. This rain lasted throughout the evening. The next morning, he woke up to an extremely muggy room, with loud sounds of rain hitting the rooftop outside. Zhang Wuji bought a hat from the innkeeper, and continued to ride despite the weather. Fortunately, his horse is a prize stallion, which kept its footing despite galloping on the incredibly slippery mud. Upon reaching the edge of the Yellow River, he saw thick yellow river waves rolling heavily in the river, the current almost impossible for anyone to cross. He found out from the local residents that the water downstream had flooded the riverbanks, and devastated the people there. As Zhang Wuji entered the nearby town, only to see the flood victims seeking refuge in the town, everyone soaked in water. As he traveled across town, Zhang Wuji saw a row of riders in front, who just happened to be the people of the Dragon Gate escort agency. He hurried up, went past them, and blocked their way. Distressed upon seeing Zhang Wuji, Jin stuttered, What do you need, fifth hero Zhang? Zhang Wuji said, have you seen the homeless people from the flooding? Jin didn't expect this question, paused, and then responded, why do you ask? Zhang Wuji smirked, said, it's always right to do good deeds. How about donating some gold to the needy? Jin's face turned white, said, people like us put our lives on the line when we work. How would we find the money to save the homeless? Zhang Wuji lowered his voice, said, why don't you take out the 2,000 taels of gold, and donate them? Jin reached for his saber, asked, are you purposely looking for trouble today? Zhang Wuji said, yes. I'm going to get the money either way today. Sub-leaders Zhu and Shi took out their weapons, and moved up next to Jin. Meanwhile, Zhang Wuji remained empty-handed, smirked, and then said, Leader Du, you took your customers' money. But did you accomplish the task asked? Do you really have the nerve to keep the gold? Jin said with a purple face, but Hero Yu was sent to the Wudang mountain alive, right? He was already injured when we took him in, and he's still not dead even now. Zhang Wuji said angrily, do you really think you can weasel your way out of this? Were my third brother's joints broken before you escorted him? Before Jin could respond, sub-leader Shi cut in, just say what you want us to do. Zhang Wuji said, I'm going to break every single bone in your arms and legs. As he said this, he immediately flew forward. Sub-leader Shi quickly raised his staff to attack, while Zhang Wuji's left hand swooshed down and across to the left, writing out his newly learnt kung fu's long slant in the character heaven. Sub-leader Shi's staff fell out of his hand, and fell off the horse. Sub-leader Zhu wanted to retreat, but how could he be quick enough? Zhang Wuji very naturally finished the character heaven with the short slant right, finger swept across sub-leader Zhu's waist, grabbed it, and threw him and his saddle a few meters away, in one smooth motion. For sub-leader Zhu's foot were stuck so firmly into the stirrup, plus Zhang Wuji's move was simply too powerful, that the saddle actually broke off the horse. With his feet firmly stuck in the stirrup, sub-leader Zhu couldn't get up. Shocked upon seeing such quick and smooth attacks, Jin quickly got his horse to move forward. Zhang Wuji turned around swiftly, gathered his energy, and shot out his left fist. This attack is the vertical stroke in the character under, which hit Jin flatly on the chest. Jin's kung fu is much better than Zhu and Shi, and did not fall off the horse. With extreme anger, he reined in his horse, tried to get off his horse to fight, when suddenly he felt a surge of pain from his throat, and coughed up a gulp of blood. He staggered, took a deep breath, only to feel yet another cluster of hot blood, surging within. Although he tried to act tough, his body could not hold up, both knees weakened, and fell down to the ground. 3 young sub-leaders and all the rest of the people could only watch in alarm, who dared step forward to help. Zhang Wuji originally planned to break their arms and legs, to help vent his frustration, but upon seeing the 3 agency leaders injured so deeply, especially Jin, he now felt a little guilty. He never realized just how powerful this new heaven and dragon kung fu really is. Zhang Wuji said, listen up. Today I'll stop here. But you must promise to give all your money to the homeless, so they can rebuild their homes. Don't try to cheat. If I find out that you've kept any money for yourselves, I'll tear down your Dragon Gate escort agency, and kill every living, breathing person in it. That last sentence came from Jin's story of what that customer Yin had said, so he conveniently used it. Jin tried to get up, only to feel his back in extreme pain, and began to cough up blood again. Sub-leaders Zhu and Shi only had some scratches, but neither dared fight Zhang Qiushan again. "Sub-leader," she said, "Fifth hero Zhang, since we could not accomplish our task, we should return the money to our customer. Besides, the money is back at the agency. How can we use it to help these homeless?" Zhang Qiushan said with a cold smile, "Do you think I'm a child? All your kung fu experts came on this delivery. There are only family members back at the agency. Would you really keep so much money with them?" He scanned around, and walked over to one of the carts. Zhang Qiushan raised his palm to hit the case. Bang, bang, bang. The case on the cart fell apart, as gold nuggets fell out. The leaders' faces turned pale, as they wondered, how did he knew it was on that cart? They didn't realize that although Zhang Qiushan is young, he's smart and experienced. He saw that this cart made the heaviest prints. And the three people guarding it did not try move at all when their leaders were attacked. Therefore, this case must contain some valuable items. After a cold laugh, Zhang Qiushan got up on his horse, and galloped away. He felt very delighted, knowing that due to Jin's fear for his relative's safety, he would certainly give the money to the needy. As he continued riding, Zhang Qiushan repeated the variations of those 24 characters in his head. That night when he first saw this kung fu, he simply felt that it was mysterious and strange. Only when used in combat, did Zhang Qiushan realize its power. To him, learning a new, powerful kung fu felt 10 times better than obtaining some priceless treasure. Finally, when he remembered Yu Daiyan's condition, Zhang Qiushan could not help but sigh in sadness. He traveled for several days in the heavy rain. Even with his spotted horse's endurance, fatigue set in after a while. By the time he arrived in the Shanxi province, his horse became a bit sick. Caring about the health of his horse, Zhang Qiushan traveled very slowly for quite some time. So it was already the 30th day of the 4th month when he arrived at the city of Linen. He booked a room at the local inn, and wondered, "I've traveled way too slowly. I wonder if Jin and his people had returned to the agency. Where could my second and 7th brother be? Also, considering my altercation with Jin and the others, I don't think I can go to their agency openly. I should instead go in secret tonight." After dinner, upon asking an inn worker, he found out that the location of the Dragon Gate Escort Agency lies by the bank of the Westlake. At the marketplace, he bought a new robe and the incredibly renowned fan of Hangzhou. Afterwards he took a bath, brushed his hair, and changed his clothing. Zhang Qiushan looked into the mirror, only to see himself looking nothing like a kung fu expert, but rather a scholar. Zhang Qiushan held up a brush, thought he should write a poem on it, and spontaneously wrote out the Heaven Sword and Dragon Saber poem, each stroke naturally and elegantly. Looking at the fan again, he thought, wow. Even my writing skills have improved from learning this new kung fu. These words look excellent. He folded the fan, walked outside, towards the Westlake. Even before the end of the Southern Sung dynasty, Linen had fell under the control of the Mongolians. Due to its location as the capital of the Southern Sung dynasty, the Mongolians were especially weary of its citizens, afraid that they may be too deeply in love with the old regime. Therefore, they established harsh, strict policies unto the citizens. That's why most people have moved to other places. 100 years ago, Linen had been an incredibly prosperous place, but that was the old days. As Zhang Qiushan walked down the road, he only saw broken-down houses, dust in his eyes, as the former famous city of the lower Yangtze River region had turned into almost a ghost town. Even though the sun had not yet set, all the residents had already closed their doors and windows, only to see Mongolian patrol soldiers marching on the street. Zhang Qiushan didn't want unnecessary trouble, so he immediately hid in the alley upon hearing the sounds of the troops. In the past, lanterns would light up the river at night, but now, only darkness covered the city, with no pedestrians in sight. Zhang Qiushan followed the inn worker's directions to the Dragon Gate Escort Agency. The agencies is made up of 5 buildings, one linked behind another, its gate facing the Westlake, with a pair of stone lions decorating the entrance. Zhang Qiushan saw the large houses from afar, walked toward it slowly, only to see a boat docked at the lake outside. 2 lanterns lit up the front of the boat, with a single person tasting wine under the candlelight. Zhang Qiushan thought, this person is in an artistic mood. Only to see the lanterns outside the agency unlit, the large front doors shut tightly, probably meant that everyone inside is already asleep. Zhang Qiushan walked to the main gate and thought, Jin said that someone carried 3rd brother here a month ago. I wonder who was that? While pondering, he suddenly heard a deep sigh from behind him. This sigh sounded like a ghost in the dark, silent night. Zhang Qiushan quickly turned, scanned the area, but other than the single person on the boat, there is no one else around. Zhang Qiushan felt uneasy, examined the person on the boat, only to see him wearing a green robe, scholarly dressed, just like himself. With the dim lighting, Zhang Qiushan could not see his face clearly, but his cheeks looked very pale white, as the lanterns shined on it, looked like the green waves on the lake itself. Lone boat in the freezing water, cold and dark, seemingly out of this world. That person sat quietly on the boat, and for a long, long time, other than the sleeves flying with the wind, there was no movement. Zhang Qiushan originally wanted to sneak into the building, but changed his mind upon seeing the man on the boat, thinking that it's really not the righteous thing to do. So he went up to the door and knocked 3 times. In the silence of the night, the sound from these 3 knocks could be heard from far away. Yet for a long time, no one came to the door. Zhang Qiushan knocked on the door 3 more times, a bit louder this time, almost hurting his ears. Again he could hear no movement from inside. Not sure what's going on, he reached out with his hand and pushed the door, only to see it open without a sound, for it was not locked. Zhang Qiushan entered the courtyard and yelled, "Is your escort leader due here?" As he spoke, he walked into the main hall. The main hall is completely dark, without any candlelight. Suddenly, the main gate closed quickly behind him. Zhang Qiushan hesitated a moment, turned around towards the gate, only to see it shut tightly, the lock now in place, meaning there's someone here with him. Zhang Qiushan smiled coldly, thought, what's this all about? Given the circumstances, he might as well enter the main hall. So he stepped into the room, only to hear sounds of wind coming from all directions, as 4 people surrounded him. Zhang Qiushan jumped out of the harm's way. In the darkness, white light glittered, only to see weapons in each person's hand. He quickly moved to the left, towards the west side, as his right fist swept across, hitting the sun point of one of the attackers, stunning him instantly, followed by his left hand sweeping from top right down to bottom left, hitting another person's waist. These are the first 2 strokes of No. Zhang Qiushan's left hand then swooshed down, as his right fist shot out and wrote the point, completing the whole No character through these 4 strokes, knocking down all 4 attackers. He doesn't exactly know who his attackers are, so Zhang Qiushan did not use much power, only about 30% or so. When the 4th person fell down, breaking a chair along the way, he yelled, "I can't believe you're so venomous. If you're a true man, then you should leave your name." Zhang Qiushan said with a smile, "If I'm truly venomous, do you think you'd be alive right now? My name is Zhang Qiushan." That person gasped, as if quite surprised. He said, "You really are Wudang's 5th hero? Silver Hook Iron Brush Zhang Qiushan? You're not just pretending?" Zhang Qiushan smiled, reached into his robe and took out his weapons. His left hand held the silver tiger hook, and his right hand held the judge's iron brush. As the 2 weapons scratched across one another, a few sparks appeared. During this brief moment of light, Zhang Qiushan saw the 4 people wearing yellow monk robes lying in front of him, for these are monks. Of course, those monks also saw his appearance at this time. 2 of the monks stared intently at him, their eyes filled with hatred. Bewildered, Zhang Qiushan asked, "May I have your names?" Only to hear a monk yell, "Looks like we can't get our revenge today. Let's go." As he spoke, the 4 monks got up, about to leave. But one of them suddenly fell down after walking a few steps, probably because Zhang Qiushan hurt him too deeply. 2 monks returned to carry him. Zhang Qiushan yelled out, "Could you wait up a moment? Revenge for what?" Before he could finish, the monks had jumped over the wall. Zhang Qiushan felt that something's not right, but could not pinpoint the exact reason. Why would there be 4 monks hiding in the Dragon Gate escort agency? Why did they ambush him? And what's with this whole revenge deal? He thought, surely the residents here would know. He raised his voice and asked, "Is escort leader due at home? Is escort leader due at home?" In the empty hall, echoes reverberated from the walls, yet there is no response. Zhang Qiushan thought, surely not all of them slept so soundly, that no one heard me. Are they afraid of me, and simply hiding? Or perhaps they all left? He lit up a match, only to see several candles on a nearby table. He then lit up a candle and walked into the rooms in the back. After only a few steps, Zhang Wuji saw a woman lying on the floor motionless. He yelled out, "Big sister, what's going on?" That woman remained still. Zhang Wuji put a hand under her shoulders and pulled her up, then moved the candle over her face, and gasped out loud. Only to see this woman smiling, but her muscles tense, and had been dead for several hours. Zhang Wuji thought she was dead when he touched her, but still felt odd that she'd die with a smile on her face. He stood up, only to see someone behind the left pillar. Walking over, he saw an old man dressed in servant clothing, also dead with a smile on his face. Bewildered, Zhang Wuji pulled out his silver hook and scanned the room with the candle. He found several tens of people dead both inside and outside all the houses. Indeed, the place is filled with corpses, with absolutely no one left alive. After traveling around the world for many years, Zhang Wuji had already seen many tragedies, but never a massacre such as this one. His heart fluttered, only to see his own shadow shook on the wall. For his hands were wavering, shaking the candle with it, and naturally the shadow too. Suddenly, he remembered something. "If you fail to make this delivery, I'll kill everyone in the Dragon Gate escort agency." Obviously, these people died due to Jin's mistake, not able to adequately protect Yu Dian on the way to Wudang. He then thought, that person obviously killed these people because of third brother. Which means he should be third brother's friend. But why would the third brother befriend such a vicious person? Besides, he's obviously much better than Jin in terms of kung fu, so why didn't he escort third brother himself? The more Zhang Wuji thought, the more mysterious this whole deal became. He walked out the door to the west. With the candlelight, he saw two yellow-robed monks, backs against the wall, examining him. Zhang Wuji backed off a couple of steps, tightened the grip on his hook, and asked, "What do you want?" Only to see the two monks motionless, when suddenly, he realized that they're also dead. Zhang Wuji gasped, yelled out loud, "Oh no! Revenge, revenge! Didn't those monks say something like, 'I can't believe you're so venomous. If you're a true man, give me your name. And also, looks like we can't get our revenge today.'" It appeared that he would be blamed for the deaths of these people. At that time when he's still in the dark about everything, Zhang Wuji not only gave his name, but also showed his renowned silver hook and iron brush. But who exactly are those yellow-robed monks?